Come on. Good morning, Midway Church. Good morning. Good. Glad you guys have joined us online. Thank you for taking this time, spend a little moment with us this morning. Always one of my most exciting times of life every year is the opportunity to come and talk about where we're going, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going as a church. Many years ago, I struggled with the concept of clear vision. Now, I've always been a dreamer since I was a kid, but a lot of them didn't come to fruition. And I learned, though, through the years, that's okay. Because while we don't always accomplish everything we dream about, we don't accomplish anything we don't first dream about. And so I'm glad to be here today to share with you a little bit about where we're going as a church. I trust that you've got a good dream and a vision for your personal life, your marriage, for your family. And maybe during this season of life and all that's taking place around the world, and a little of the chaos and uncertainty, perhaps your ability to dream about the future, a great future, has been hampered and hindered like mine has. You ever ask yourself the question, what's going to be next? Where's this going to go? How's this going to end? When is this going to end? So this morning, as we gather together, for those of you who've been a long-term part of the Midway Church family, you know what Vision Day is all about. But for those of you who are a little bit newer to the Midway family, or you're guests with us today, or you're joining us for the first time perhaps online, Vision Day is something that we focus on every year to do 4 specific things. These won't be on the screen. Just let me remind you. It's what we do every year and have for, I think this is my 23rd or 24th year to do this on a set day. And let me remind you that everything that we experience great at Midway Church today was dreamed about before it became a reality. These facilities, these seats, the atrium, the property, the Build on the Hill campaign, the people that we lead to Christ, the specific ministries we've started, the mission partners, and dreaming about partnering with different countries around the world, about our online audience, our online mechanism to make sure we get the gospel out to the most people, and we're prepared for this particular virus. All that was a dream over the last several years we presented, and then it became a reality. And here's what I've learned through the years. God knows where we're going a year from now. God knows where we're going 5 years from now. He knows where your life's going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And so we tap into what vision God is stirring in our soul. The Bible says that if you delight yourself in the Lord, God will give you the desires of your heart. That means that God will put His desires into your heart when you delight in Him and you begin to follow those dreams as you walk with God. And if you're truly walking with God, just keep on dreaming, keep on walking, and God ultimately just sort of spreads out and opens up the future because He knows what's out there. These 4 things are this. First of all, we always reflect on our past. Where have we been? It's been a great journey. Our church has been here for, 170-something years, about almost 175 years. I've been here not quite that long. Feels that way sometimes, but next June will be 25 years that I have been pastor of Midway Church. And we had about 200 people when I came. We were in the little building down the hill. It's been an amazing, amazing journey to just see year after year what God continues to do. It's been one of the greatest joys of my life. Number 2, not only do we reflect on our past, but when you begin to reflect on your past, you're going to find out you've got some challenges. Sometimes that challenges you. And you have to learn how to fix you. Sometimes those challenges are issues and things that are outside of us. They're not our doing. They're not inside our own thinking, but they're outward challenges out there. Sometimes it's other people. Sometimes it's physical things. Sometimes it's resources. And it's been all of those things at different times, at different seasons throughout our journey. But every year it's a time for us to come together, find out what our challenges are, and we try to introduce solutions and strategies to overcome those challenges. Number 3, every year at Vision Day, we also leave inspired with a clear vision for our future. Now, we can't understand everything that's going to happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now. That's God's business. But we can begin to get clear direction as to what needs to happen next. Next is one of the best four-letter words you'll ever memorize and use regularly. Next. What's next? What's next for me in my life? What's next for my kids? What's next for my spouse? What's next for my career? What's next for my spiritual journey? What's next for my church? What's next for our community? What's next for our nation? And begin tap in. You don't have to worry about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. Just talk about what's next and keep moving and stepping and leaning into what's next. And then you'll find before you know it, 24 or 25 years have clicked off and you've seen great things take place. So what's next? Number 4, we always leave here committed to move forward together. Together is a beautiful word. Leave here committed to work together. One of Midway Church's hallmarks through the years, and it's not by accident, it's not because of it's not easy, it isn't a result of a lack of sacrifice. It's taken great commitment, sacrifice. And we haven't always agreed on every little dotting of an I or a crossing of every T, but we've committed to move the journey together, and together we can do great things. So with all of that as a background, if you have your Bibles, I'm in Psalm chapter 126. Psalm 126. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1 in just a moment. And you can join us from home. You can open up your Bible. You can use your mobile phone or a Bible app, or you can just Google Psalm 126. It's an amazing Bible passage in the middle of your Bible. Psalm 126, beginning in verse 1. If you have found it and are ready for the word, say, let's see what we want to say. I'm all in. How's that? All right, here we are. Verse 1. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Our mouths were filled with laughter then, and our tongues with shouts of joy. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we were joyful. Restore our fortunes, Lord, he prays here, like watercourses in the Negev. Those who sow in tears will reap in shouts of joy. Though one goes along weeping, carrying the bag of seed, he will surely come back with shouts of joy, carrying his sheaves. Another word for harvest, bringing his harvest with him. Father, you know the journey that we're on, that you have us on. No surprise to you. I pray you would use this text, your word, to give us clarity, to give us strength, inspiration, perspective, that we might be able to move forward with confidence into the future you've laid ahead. In Jesus' name, and all God's people said, amen. 70 years before the context of this passage, a man by the name of Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon, king of Babylon, had gone to Jerusalem and seized that city. Nebuchadnezzar, when he went into Jerusalem, he slaughtered all the old people. It says he burned down the walls and the gates with fire. He tore down the temple in rubbish, messed up the city, killed the old people, stole the young people, turned them into slaves, and made them walk from Jerusalem all the way to Babylon, which is modern-day Baghdad. On the way out of that city, 4 of the most famous of those captives were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The fiery furnace, the lion's den, all took place in this 70 years. During that period of time, these young men had been taken away from the life they'd always known. and they lived thinking about what used to be. You ever find yourself there? Just lived every day thinking about what used to be. It began to affect their worship life. As a matter of fact, while they're on the journey out of Jerusalem, the Babylonians began to make fun of them as they're weeping, walking along as captives. And they said, hey, you Jewish people, you're a singing people. You're a musical people. Sing us some of the Lord's songs that you have. And it says that they stopped and hung their harps and their stringed instruments on the willow trees by a river and never picked them up again. And they said, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land when all we can do is reflect upon what used to be, and now we've lost it all? And it stole the song and the joy and the worship out of their heart and out of their soul. 70 years passed by. Nebuchadnezzar died. Another king arose, and that king died. Another king arose, and that king died. Another king arose, and that king died. And finally, there's a man by the name of Cyrus, king of Babylon. Cyrus, a pagan king. God moved upon the heart of this pagan king, and God gave him clarity and a command to let his people go, let the Jewish people go, and go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls. You'll find that story in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. And so that's what happened. So 70 years passed, and now they are moving upward. Jerusalem is always upward. Anywhere in the Middle East, Jerusalem is considered a high point. And so as they moved upward toward Jerusalem, they worshiped. This psalm that I just read is referred to as a song of ascent. It's as they ascended up to Jerusalem for worship, they prepared their hearts for meditation and for worship and for restoration in their own spiritual souls and their own life as they moved up toward worship. And so as we sort of watch their journey and the way they understood life at the end of that 70 years, as they get the chance now to move back and see restored what they feel had been taken away so many years earlier from their ancestors, from their journey, we learn 3 key principles for our own journey right now here today, just as relevant. You ready for them? Number 1, write this down. When you are trying to prepare for a better future in the hardest of times, that's our focus this morning, preparing for a better future in the hardest of times. Number 1, remember and celebrate God's faithfulness. Remember and celebrate God's faithfulness. When times are hard, we have a tendency to think God's not faithful anymore, and we have very short memories regarding the good stuff God's done in our life in the past, and we have long memories about all the bad stuff that we feel like God's done to us over the past. We have to reverse that. And it's a personal, I said earlier that sometimes we ourselves are the issue. We ourselves are the problem. We are sometimes our biggest obstacle. In this case, that is true. Because if we get to the point where we have a short memory on the goodness of God and His faithfulness through the years, and a long memory over what we feel God may have cut us short on or not done us right or been fair in us regarding life toward us, then somehow that's going to create a massive wall in our own spiritual journeys, and it's difficult to get over. And so remembering God's goodness in the past, I don't have to go back very far to remember some major goodness of God. I couldn't help but reflect some this morning. I stand here today as pastor of this church. I remember as a kid in middle school, we camped out this type of weather every Friday night. Some buddies and I. There were about 7 of us. 6 or 7 of us. And we couldn't afford much. We had these, we had to buy our own hot dogs, and we had loaf bread. You didn't even get mustard. You just had bread and dogs. That's what it was. And we couldn't afford those big beef wieners. We had what we called over in Tallapoosa chicken weenies. Back then, you'd get them about 49 cents a whole pack. And we would devour, we get chicken weenies and a loaf of bread. And that was supper, and that was breakfast. And that was everything while we were camping out. And these were some awesome guys. About 2/3 of us grew up in Christian homes. We were in church every week. One was a pastor's kid. My dad was a deacon of the church. Another man's Another boy's dad was a deacon in the church. There were a couple of guys that didn't have a church home. They didn't go to church, but we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that. We just loved each other. We enjoyed life together. I look back over those years. I'm talking 7th and 8th grade. I remember building a fire together. I remember it snowing several times while we're out there camping and just freezing to death. You feel like your toes are burning off and because they're so cold and they're going to drop off. And I began to reflect on some of that this morning. And yet, we did all that stuff together. We also were introduced to drugs together. 4 of that inner circle group are dead today because of overdoses. 4. Including the pastor's kid. Including the prominent businessman's kid. Great, great guys. I look back at my life and I see little forks. Do you see any of those in your life? I see forks. I see crossroads. I see opportunities. I see turns. And I look back through history and I see where somehow in a way that I don't fully comprehend, God in His sovereignty and His grace and His power somehow, in most of those cases, I didn't avoid all of them, but in most of those cases, somehow, God helped me make the correct turns. Instead of me being dead today with an overdose, which I could easily have been, today I'm standing here challenging a church of people in West Georgia, one of the largest churches around, and somehow God's allowed me to experience this. You see, when you and I pause and look back and reflect upon the goodness of God and the greatness of God and His faithfulness in our life, man, it just puts things in perspective. Look at the wife that I've been married to almost 40 years. Look at my daughters. Look at my sons-in-laws, my grandchildren. I look at our friends and family and church, and I don't have to go very far to just really get overjoyed about some of the goodness of God. It isn't all perfect. It isn't all gravy. There are challenges, there are frustrations, there's disappointments, there's heartaches that we deal with, and there's all kinds of difficulty every day that you and I awaken. But don't quit worshiping and reflecting and remembering the awesome goodness of God. They did. It says that they actually looked back in hindsight and said, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, that's Jerusalem, we were like those who dream. Man, it was just like a dream. I couldn't hardly believe it. God had been so good as I look back. It's easy to do that in the past. Look back, see, remember how things used to be. He said our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with shouts of joy. And then they even said, even the nations around the world will say, the Lord has done great things for them. You and I have a spiritual heritage, not only in the West Georgia community, but around the world. There are several that I've asked in our church family, how did you find out about Midway Church? What brought you to Midway Church? I asked someone this just recently, and their exact response was, well, I used to work in Carrollton. I would drive by, and I remember the little building down the hill, and a couple of years later, I remember seeing grading start up on the hill, and I thought, well, God's doing something there, and they were involved in a church over toward Atlanta, and soon they would be moving out this way, and then they said they would drive by, and then they saw this building, and they saw another, and then they started hearing stories about families and connections and people giving their life to Christ, and life transformation and life change, and ministries that were happening here, and other impactful ministries happening in other places around the world. And our reputation begins to travel out there and move and spread out through the community. And we have that. My concern and my challenge, and one of the things on me today, is not what is our reputation and spiritual heritage today in West Georgia. It's what is it going to be 10 years and 20 years from now. Because the last 25 years have come and gone faster than I ever could have comprehended. And you don't gain a spiritual heritage, you don't gain spiritual reputation, you don't gain spiritual influence for the kingdom of God overnight. It's not what we're enjoying just today, because what we're enjoying today didn't happen today and it didn't happen last week. It happened over many, many years. And right now, during this season, in many respects, in many ways, I have to admit that we are somewhat coasting on a previous impact in West Georgia, rather than the impact perhaps we're making even today. Some of that has to be restarted. I'll talk about that in just a few moments. And then they recognize, yes, God really has been good to us. But there's a shift that happens in verse 4 in the tone. You still with me? Say, I am. Not only must we remember and celebrate God's faithfulness, but secondly, in verse 4, we must ask God to do it again. Ask God to do it again. He says here in verse 4, restore our fortunes, Lord, like water courses in the Negev. Now, what in the world is he talking about? Water courses in the Negev. The Negev were waterways and water courses, some of them natural, some of them man-made, in the southern regions of Israel where it's more desert-like. And for a large portion of the year, it would be sand and dirt and barren and nothing green, everything tan and brown. No life. And when the rains would start, it would so flood that southern region that all of those valleys and all of those rivers and all those cisterns and all those water courses would be all of a sudden just virtually just like that, filled up overnight. Because the floods would come and the valley would turn green and the flowers would bloom and the grass would grow. And he uses the metaphor. He says, God, just like you do it every year when the rains begin, would you do it again? Would you restore us again? Would you pour out your Spirit on us again? Would you pour out your blessing? Would you increase our fortunes? Would you help us experience the blessing that we have experienced in time past? Would you do it once again? Now, I have to admit that sometimes I struggle not with necessarily asking for God to do it again, but I have to admit that I sometimes struggle that God will do it again. But we're to ask, we're to pray, restore our fortunes, Lord, like you do the Negev. Ask, He'll do it again. I don't know what has gone on in your own family. Perhaps your own wealth, perhaps your own health, perhaps your own kids, perhaps your own life, perhaps your own future, your ability to dream about the future. Don't be afraid to ask that God do it again. And then third, you find here in this text, not only must we remember and celebrate God's faithfulness, ask God to do it again, but third, begin planting for a new harvest. Begin planting for a new harvest. He says in verse 5, those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy, and though one goes along weeping, carrying the bag of seed, he will surely come back with shouts of joy, carrying the sheaves. Now, this doesn't make sense to you and me in our culture. I grew up planting a garden, not because we had to, but because we chose to, and we enjoyed fresh vegetables. But I never worked in the garden and cried at the same time. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. Those who go forth bearing the precious seed with weeping. I've never done that. We have to understand culture in Bible lands. We have 4 seasons. Very blessed to have 4 seasons. We're in one of my favorite seasons right now. It's been really, really nice. Bible lands uses 2 seasons. There's dry and there's wet. It rains every day or it never rains. There's feast or there's famine. And this concept of sowing with tears, imagine with me for a moment. You've just come out of a great harvest. Immediately after harvest, there's awesome feasts. Families eating extremely well. You got 3 meals a day. You never have to worry about food during the fall time after the harvest. As days begin to rock on by, Finally, you move from 3 meals, and they begin to ration a little bit. You got to make sure it lasts all year long. You can't go down to Kroger. You can't go to Walmart. You can't go to Publix or any other store and pick up what you need. This is life. You have to preserve it for the entire year. You get one harvest a year, and you ration it all year. So somewhere in mid-year, you don't know what's going to happen, how many pestilence or bugs are going to get in the grain and all that. And so they hold it out, and they ration down finally 2 meals a day. And then finally, just before they begin to plant again, there's 1 meal a day. And finally, the kids begin to wake up hungry, and parents begin to share their food with their kids, and mothers' milks begin to dry up, and they can no longer nurse their babies, and babies are crying, and they're hearing the crying. And finally, a little boy runs down to the barn. He's playing in the barn, and he finds this bag of grain. Dad, I found some food. We can have a big supper tonight. And Dad says, oh no, son, don't touch that. That's our seed grain. We can't eat our seed grain. And about that time, they begin to toil the ground, the soil, and Dad begins to walk out through there, and he's hungry, and his kids are hungry, and his wife is hungry, and he's holding food, literal food in his hands, but he can't eat it. And he walks along, and he's planting the seeds, and he weeps as he plants because his family's hungry, and he's planting in faith and trusting God. God, please let this count because this is all there is. And he weeps as he sows in the hardest of times. He finds a way to sow in the hardest of times. Not withhold, but sow in the hardest of times. Why? Because if you don't sow, you don't reap. You see, growing up as a kid, we grew the garden, but it wasn't because we had to. It's because we wanted to. But the biblical principle is this, that if you don't sow, you don't reap. If you try to reap without sowing, you're a mooch. You're stealing from somebody else. You're taking what doesn't belong to you. You didn't put forth the effort. God says if a man won't work, don't let him eat. That's a part of the sowing and reaping. You put labor from your hands and from your heart and your life so that you can, with good conscience, take and enjoy. And that's part of our sowing process of every day of life, planting not just for today, but for tomorrow and for next year and for next month and next year and a year after that and 10 years from now. And we keep on planting because we keep on expecting some harvest along the way until we leave this world. And he says, those who sow in tears will reap in joy. So my question is, what are you sowing? What are you sowing? You know, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about you. Draw the circle around you. What are you sowing right now? What are you sowing into your own life right now? What are you sowing into your family? What are you sowing into your kids? What are you sowing into your church? What are you sowing into your spiritual life? What are you sowing into your nation? What are you sowing into your community? What are you sowing? Because whatever you sow, that you shall also reap. That's why we can all be a part of the same building and not everybody get the same harvest, because everybody isn't sowing the same thing. What are you sowing? Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7 says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, he will also reap. And verse 9, he says, so we must not get tired of doing good, for we will reap at the proper time if we don't give up. Keep on sowing the right stuff. It's a good story. I want to tell you. 1996, I came here to Midway Church, a little building down the hill. I had no idea God was going to do what he has done. Now I dreamed, but I have to admit that I dreamed big at another church for 10 years, and I never saw what I have seen here at Midway Church. God did something special here from first month, June 1996. In that first month, I think we baptized, 30, 40 people. The windows of heaven opened. People were giving their life to Christ. It was just a really unique thing. 200 people, and now all of a sudden we're just seeing great things happen. By that fall, very first fall, we were in 2 services in the little building. A year and a half later, we're in 3 services, 2 Sunday school hours in that little building. We were talking about building on the hill, and 7 years went by, and we finally moved up here on the hill, and we built this building, and we built the Family Life Center, and that was pretty much all that was here. Time rocked on. 7 years had passed by, 2003. And I found myself teaching at a leadership training conference for church planting. And God grabbed my soul over some information I received. And it was that in Carroll County, only 14.4% of Carroll County's residents attended a church of any denomination of any kind on any given Sunday. 14.4. And I came away from that feeling like I was a failure as a pastor. We're not doing what needs to be done. I was reading a book at that time called This Present Darkness by Reggie McNeil. And inside that book, I remember reading the statistic about a younger generation that didn't even know Christ. And among those at the time that were about 30 years of age or under, in nationally speaking, only about 4% of them even professed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ in our entire nation. And once again, I was shaken to my core. And all this is churning on the inside of me. And then in addition to that, I noticed in our community that our community was becoming a little more racially diverse, and yet our church, even though a little bit, had not really become racially diverse and still has not completely, and we're working towards some of those things. But it was something in my mind that as I would read the book of the Revelation, and the Bible said that someday people from every tribe and every nation and every tongue and every language will someday worship around one throne, one God. And my thought was, if that's going to happen someday, why not today? And those 3 things stirred me on the inside, and I'm going to be honest with you, I had a life made. Best life possible. Our church loved me. I loved our church. I loved our people. We had more money in the bank than you could imagine. We were paying all of our bills. We were on the edge of getting out of debt, even these facilities. We paid off these $3 million facilities in about 4 or 5 years. It was just amazing what was happening. There was a sense, if I can speak this way, there was a sense of cushiness to my life. Y'all all right? And then God started on me. Ever do that with you? I remember going to our deacons, to our leadership at the time, and I said, men, I don't want to stir up anything. I don't want to mess up anything, but I'm just telling you, I can't keep on doing what I've always done. Because here's these 3 big problems I'm staring at, and our church isn't being effective at any one of those things. And I've been around long enough to know that if you always do what you've always done, you're going to always get what you always got, and something has to change. I grew up in West Georgia. I love West Georgia. I love West Georgia culture. I love West Georgia church. I love my big choir. I love their piano and organ. I grew up playing a banjo myself. My first job in the church was leading worship. I love Southern gospel. I sang in a quartet. I did all that stuff. I loved all that stuff. But it was all beside that now, because God had intervened in my soul and said, you can't let this continue. And I had to walk into those men and say, it's been the best 7 years of my life. I don't even know what all I'm talking about, but I know God's leading me on a different journey of church leadership. I'd be glad to stay here and try to lead Midway to become that kind of church wherever it takes us. But if you don't want to do that, I'm okay. I love you. I love this church. Give me about 6 months to find where God wants me to be and where I know He's doing something. I just need to know where it is. And they came back and said, we believe God brought you here. We don't believe God's finished with you. If He's doing that inside of you, we believe He's doing that here. And we'll be with you on the journey. I want to say that those men, those that are not dead, most all of them are still in our church and have been faithful and loyal right along the journey, and have fought some of the hardest emotional and sometimes family battles you can imagine for our church to be what it is today. And I want to say thank you to all of them. And I think you ought to thank them right now. All it would have taken is for a couple of those men to not believe in me or what God was doing in my soul. And this could be a different place. And we got a long way to go, but it's going to require that same kind of faith that they used back then, 2003. It's going to take that kind of faith right now to get us to move forward. Y'all all right? Now it's not on them, it's on you. In 2005, we had groundbreaking. Actually, it was November 2004. I stood here at this very celebration, Vision Day. I introduced you the concept of our atrium, our preschool and children facility. We had plans. It was going to be a $9 million project. Our banknote was going to be $70,000 per month. Massive faith. Our church voted unanimously to move that direction. We had groundbreaking 1 year later. We actually paid ourselves for 1 full year, $70,000 a month, just to see if we could do it. That's called prudence. So we entered in with over $800,000 to start toward the project. And we borrowed over $8 million. Then in 2007, our church received a great honor and award. We were recognized as the fastest growing church in the Georgia Baptist Convention out of 3,600 churches. God was showering his blessing, and I remember his faithfulness today. Then we had the economic collapse and shutdown of 08, 9, and 10. Massive, massive hardship and challenges. We had to cut out over $500,000 out of our annual operations. We never missed a single payment. We restructured all of our financing. I stood before you at Vision Day of 2010, and I gave to you a challenge called the 2020 Vision. That doesn't sound like a good name right now, does it? The 2020 Vision. And I laid out for you, a part of that was to be out of debt in December of 2020, meaning to pay off our debt 6 years early before its maturity. And we started a process. Time began to rock on. I stood before you 1 year ago, right here, last year. At the moment of standing here 1 year ago, our debt was at that point $2.2 million. 2.2. I must admit that I questioned if we could go and reach our 2020 vision of being out of debt in December of 2021 or 2020. But you gave generously at last year's Jesus birthday offering. And combined with Jesus birthday offering and what we paid throughout this year, I want to say in the last 12 months, you've paid $1.4 million onto our principal. Okay? On our principal. That leaves us a total of $790,000 to pay off. Now, that sounds a little more manageable. That's not the best part. The best part is, I want to say this, and again, if I'm wrong, it is truly an honest mistake, but I didn't confirm this. I'm 99% sure in the midst of COVID year, this has been our best giving year in history. Okay? Your faithfulness and generosity. I learned a long time ago, you don't have to be rich to be generous. You just have to be generous to be generous. Okay? And you've been generous. We actually have set aside, in addition to all that we've paid, another $485,000 right now that we can write a check for and plan to pay our debt down even more. Leaving us with a total of $215,000 to raise at Jesus' birthday offering this year and to be out of debt. And for that, I just want to celebrate. By faith, we've already scheduled January the 3rd to have a note burning right here ceremonially on the platform, celebrating going into 2021 being debt-free as a church. What a blessing. Now, I said all that to say that you planted over years. You sowed generosity. I've watched you give to churches. I've watched you give to the poor. I've watched you give to orphans. As a matter of fact, in addition to the $215,000 that we'll give to help us get out of debt, we'll give several more $1,000. I think it's about $30,000 we'll give to orphans in East Africa. We'll also give $50,000 a Lottie Moon Christmas offering, another $20,000 to train leaders, multiply leaders in different places around the world. Total of $400,000 this year for Jesus' birthday offering, and that'll be one of our smallest we've had in probably the last 6 years if we reach that, and I'm convinced by faith we'll reach that, and yet we'll be debt-free. Now, I want to end today by giving you what's next. I said earlier that asking the question, what's next, one of the most powerful things you can do. I'm not concerned about 2022. 2025 that much. But 2021 concerns me. It's 2 months away. I want to say to you that there has to be, and I want to say to those of you who are online and not in the room, every one of us, there has to be a mind shift between now and January 1st, 2021. Regardless of who gets elected as president in a couple of days. There has to be a mind shift, a new mindset over the next couple of months, and you're going to have to work on yourself to get there. Let me share with you our 6 goals for the next year, and I'm done. It won't take that long. Number 1 on the list, they're on the screen. Reinvigorate our Midway family to serve the Midway Mission as we move forward in a COVID-19 world. Some of you are waiting for all this to go over, to be gone. I want to remind you, we've had the flu with us, influenza, for a lot of years. And thousands of people die of it every year. It's not to make light of it. It's a dangerous thing. I've had it on several occasions. There are vaccines, and even in vaccines, only about 40, 50% really will help you. We live with certain risks. Here's a challenge for you. It's 100% certain you're going to die of something. 100%. There's a 97%, and I'm no doctor, I don't pretend to be, and absolutely nothing that I'm saying politically. Could care less what anybody else perceives or wants to attach to it. Just want to talk plainly for a second. There are folks who are still scared to death. There are folks in our church fellowship who've just gotten COVID that I know. There's some folks who've just gotten over it. There are some folks who've died of it in our own church. Everything I say, I do not say out of any disrespect or any belittling of the challenges. But the fact is, you could die in your car on the way home too. Okay? We have to learn, it's a new thing, so we have to learn how to mitigate risks, how to learn how to live together and work together as communities and as family, as church. But life has to continue. And the mission of Jesus Christ has continued. Not once in Scripture do you ever find that the Great Commission or that the Christian life is ever intended to be a safe life. Jesus actually said, you cannot be my disciple unless you pick up your cross and follow me. You're going to die. Some young, some old. If this don't get you, something else will. Someone said you have a 97% chance if you get COVID to recover. But I want to say to you that if you die without Jesus Christ, or your friend or your neighbor or somebody dies without Jesus Christ, there is a 0% chance they're coming back and get a second turn. Our mission is still vitally important. And if you take that 97%, that's a 3% chance, yes, you might die. But statistics have been done, and that's almost the same kind of percentage of dying going to Atlanta in traffic hour to the varsity to get a chili dog. If the trip doesn't get you, the chili dog will. So you mitigate the risk. You don't do it every day because heart disease will kill you. If you go and you put on a seatbelt so that if you do have an accident, maybe it won't be so serious that maybe the seatbelt will help you, or maybe you get a modern car that has an airbag. You mitigate risk, but you keep on living. And that's where we are, and there comes a point where we have to learn how to begin to try to move forward. And I get it. I get all the concerns. We have a service for that masks are required. We have a service where masks are recommended or optional. And both of those need to be fine for people. It's okay. We want to meet people where they are in their own journey. But here's where I want to talk heart to heart. We don't have childcare for this service. We don't have children's ministries. We don't have children's discipleship. We don't have life group. We don't have worship and singing for that. Why? Because so far nobody's willing. It has to be a mindset shift. I remember, let's go back in the old days, back in March, I remember when we had over 500 kids from 5th grade down. I remember over 500 children, 5th grade down. And I walked through those buildings over there today. And they're stone cold silent. And we have to reinvigorate our own hearts and minds and lives, and people who may have never had an interest in children's ministry. That has to be our first priority. Who never had an interest, all of a sudden begin to take an interest and say, how can I help? It has to be a mindset shift. Secondly, maximize our own ramp for salvation and baptism in all areas of the church. We've not stopped sharing the gospel. The gospel is still just as powerful. Matter of fact, maybe more powerful today because people are so receptive with fears going on in their life. Even this year, we've seen, I think, about 85 people come to know Christ and follow Christ in believers' baptism during this COVID year. We continued to move forward, reaching people, but that has to be all of us collectively, and we're going to open up every ramp to try to reach people with the gospel of Christ here in West Georgia. Number 3, encourage, equip, and engage our life groups and leaders to effectively carry out our discipleship strategy. We have to find ways for our adults to meet because our gathering here at large is not our primary. This is where we get bigger Bible teaching and worship and celebrate together. It's very important, but also a small group, very important. Some of you are meeting regularly. Some of you do Zoom. Some of you meet in your home. You meet somewhere else in a larger room. We face some challenge because of the sizes of some of our groups. So we're looking for ways. If you have solutions, we're open to those solutions, but we do want to respect spacing. We do want to respect those who are a little more protective or dealing with health issues in their own life and walk alongside them. So be conciliatory in your mindset. Be solution-oriented. Be flexible in your willingness to meet and to serve and continue to minister and disciple folks. Number 4, initiate and launch our leadership advisory team process. We voted on that today and we'll be launching that, a great time of accountability, a new level in our church. Number 5, develop and implement an infrastructure action plan for 2021 to 2025. A lot of our facility now that we'll be out of debt at the end of this year, we had a lot of stuff to replace. We've got the same heat and air units we had 20 years ago when we built the building. They're gone. They limp and has to be replaced. And not only that, carpet in certain buildings and just a lot of upkeep, a new road on the back side, our parking lot's cracking, that'll have to all be replaced. So we're developing a priority plan over the next 5 years to sort of redo and get us back up to par in all these areas. And number 6, lead our people to serve West Georgia and the world in a greater capacity. I think our mindset is, what can we cut back on right now? What can we cut back on? My challenge to you is, what can we increase? What can we increase? Because what are we going to sow? What are we sowing? What are we committed to sow? It's not about holding on, it's about sowing. In our Lifeline ministry, we opened up in a new way. We've completely revamped our Lifeline ministry, and as a direct result, people are doing drive-through. They used to come in and shop. Now we can serve so many more families because of the restrictions that were put on us with COVID-19. But we have fed, this year, 4,300 families their groceries right here in West Georgia at key times of crisis. 4,300. Over 200,000 pounds of food. Our online presence is massive. I'm so thankful for the vision of some of our tech. We want to go online with our services, and my question was, well, that's just going to make people want to stay at home and watch it instead of come to church. That's my initial mindset, I have to be honest with you. I had no idea COVID-19's coming. You heard me say that God knows our future when we don't. You heard me say that, don't you? Be careful of being cynical about certain ideas. God may be doing something far beyond your intelligence. We began developing that several years ago. We now have, I believe, the best quality online experience anybody can get around. As a matter of fact, when COVID-19 first hit and the shutdowns happened, we had more people on ours than almost anywhere around because of the quality, because we've been doing it for several years. We had around 50,000 logins, separate logins during those first few weeks. People looking for spiritual nourishment in their own life. In the last 14 days, here's the nations where people have been watching our services, and they'll be watching this one, and we welcome you and are glad you're joining us. Egypt, Taiwan, Honduras, this is 14 days. Honduras, Bahamas, Pakistan, Brazil, Canada, Bonaire, India, Australia, Denmark, Finland, Italy, South Africa, French Guiana, and Romania. Those are just the top viewers. And that's an addition to right here at Midway Church. And I want to say to those of you who are watching at home, Midway Church is your home. Grateful that this has been a source for you. But if you're healthy, we need you here. And we need all of us serving together. If you got to wear your pajamas and bring your cup of coffee, bring it on. Okay? Don't be surprised if I preach in mine one day, all right? I know it's comfortable. I know it's a hard, but you need a mindset. We got to do this. There's no secondary plan to the gospel besides us, the church. If we don't do it, it's not going to get done. But together, we can do this. Sowing in the morning, sowing seeds of kindness. You heard it? Sowing in the sunshine, sowing in the shadows, fearing neither clouds nor winter's chilling breeze. By and by the harvest and the labor ended, we shall come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. The harvest is there, but we have to keep on planting, and it's time to take our seed grain in the hardest of times and work through our struggle and start planting service, start planting caring, start planting kindness, start planting love, start planting the gospel, and we can see God do it again. And my prayer is, God, do it again. And all God's people said, amen. Father, thank you for the time that we've had together today, reflecting, remembering, worshiping, being inspired. We ask you to guide us in the days ahead, and we celebrate in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen.